Good evening, everyone. I'm Katie Mediator Stover, Director of Reader Services for Kansas City Public Library. Thank you for joining us for what will be our last online author event for 2020. What a long, strange year it's been. And the key word being strange leads me to make a small confession about tonight's book, Secret Kansas City. I keep bungling the title when I talk about it. I have consistently referred to Anne Kniggendorf's collection of local curiosities as Strange Kansas City. And I had to double check all the publicity materials to make sure I had used the correct title. But can you blame me? Anne's delightful compendium of everyday sights in Kansas City with extraordinary histories is, well, weird, wonderful, and obscure. And that's a quote. But don't you wonder about the artless pile of rocks at UMKC's campus in front of Mannheim Hall? How about the people who keep leaving figurines at the feet of a statue on Brookside Boulevard? And what is up with that bridge to nowhere alongside I-70? So doesn't this all sound strange to you? Anne thought so too. She's researched over 100 of Kansas City's quirky secret items, and that's only what's in the book. There's plenty more Kansas City oddities, and tonight Anne is going to tell us about some of them that didn't make it into her book, Secret Kansas City. This book is the perfect gift for the person who loves all things Kansas City, and it's a great guide for people looking for a unique day trip for out-of-town visitors who only think they know something about Kansas City. Get a copy of Anne Kniggendorf's website, and she'll sign it for you. So stay away from Amazon. She's at annekniggendorf.com and on all the social medias, but that's not where you've seen her name. You've heard Anne's reporting on the KCUR airwaves and seen her byline in the Kansas City Star and Flatland magazine. She's also appeared in Smithsonian magazine and the Saturday Evening Post. And if you don't feel Anne's love for her hometown wafting off each page of her new book, then you need to look past the wine-sipping ghosts on the very last page. So please now give your attention to Anne Kniggendorf.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this Zoomcast. I'm going to switch to share my screen now. So here we go. And get me to the right screen here. So welcome to Secret Kansas City. I won't hit everything that Katie mentioned in the introduction. So think of those as teasers and buy the book to learn about those places. And I think we have a Q&A at the end too, if you're desperate to know. But I want to say, first of all, that I am not a historian. And sometimes I worry that people think this is a history book, and it's not at all a history book. It's just a book of strange places. And I want to explain to you how I came about writing it and how I chose what went into the book. So starting out 2 years ago, out of nowhere, I had an email from Reedy Press in St. Louis, and they apparently were looking for freelancers. And they said they wrote to me and a few other people asking if we would be interested in writing this book, Secret Kansas City. And there are other secret books. So think of another city that you like almost as much as Kansas City. And odds are that now it either has its own secret book, Secret Denver, Secret Houston, Secret Chicago, or else one is in the works for it. So I was tapped to do this, and I agreed because I love Kansas City. I've lived here for most of my life. And also I decided that this work was really similar to the work I already do for KCUR and sometimes the Star and other outlets around town. And that is, I find things I think local people will be interested in hearing about, people, places, things. So I didn't know though how to collect weird places. And I'll tell you what that means in a second. So I didn't know how to find 90 places. They originally asked me to find 90 sites and then write about their backstories. So the first thing I did, of course, was I went online and straight to Facebook. So the local Kansas City History Buffs page was really, really helpful. So I posted there As you can see on the screen, I almost immediately had 381 comments. That many people immediately wanted to help me. So the question everybody asked was, what is weird? And of course, it's really subjective, right? So this picture of the clown, this is in the bathroom of the Glore Psychiatric Museum in St. Joe. So if you have a fear of clowns, maybe wait until you swing by McDonald's later to use the bathroom. It's a pretty alarming wall. And I think it counts as weird too. There's a lot that's weird in the Glore Psychiatric Museum. I had to think, what do I tell people when they ask me, well, what's weird? Because, I had people point out that I see these things every day. These are things I pass by every day. So I'm not going to tell you, oh, write about this, because I see it every day. And there's nothing weird about that. And what I pretty quickly figured out was that they were wrong. The things we pass by every day often are the strangest ones, but I still needed some kind of criteria to tell people when I was asking for ideas. I asked everybody everywhere I went for ideas. And I started saying, if there's something that makes you say, what? That's a good indicator that that's a weird place that would fit in the book. So as I said, I have lived here most of my life. And so I really tried to use that kind of gut check. So if somebody told me something, or if I ran across something in a Google search or in a book, and I said, what? Then it went in the book in most cases. So, but I also had to be a little bit more scientific about it. So I talked to the press, what is it that you're talking about? And they said, don't put too many places that are purely historic places. Because if they're too historic, then that apparently was going to infringe on another series that the book has called, I think it's called This Used to Be. So like This Used to Be Kansas City. And as far as I know, that's not a series. But that would be talking about like maybe the site of the Whitehaven Motor Inn. Like I think there's an apartment building there now. But in that book, we'd say, okay, well, this used to be Whitehaven. And then that runs into the most important bottom criteria that I'll get to in a second. But I also couldn't include things that were museums. I have a couple in there, but for the most part, I think I had to figure that a museum has its own advertising budget. So people know museums, and even if they are very weird, and also museums, they have maybe a lot of weird things in them. So just pointing to a museum and saying, hey, here's a whole place full of weird stuff, that started to feel a little bit lazy. So then also I wanted to avoid too many businesses, and we have plenty of weird businesses in town. I think I only ended up including one of those. But the most important thing of all was that a weird story must have a place someone can actually go visit after reading about it. And so I ran into a lot of stories about strange things around Kansas City and the surrounding suburbs that I thought would be awesome to include. But alas, some of those places had been erased, like the Whitehaven Motor Lodge. And that's actually not very weird. That was maybe a bad example of that one, but that's gone. So I can't tell anybody to go see that anyway. So I got a lot of ideas then from people, lots and lots of ideas. So I think my list eventually ended up including something like, I don't know, 120 places, something like that. And like really a wide range of ideas. But then I had to go and sort through them, right? So sorting through them was tough. And I call it curating because I want people to understand that this is just my list. It just happens that it ended up bound. So anybody can make a list, and you could curate your own list of what you think is strange. But places I found were like, I tried going on tours. So I took a gangster tour. Maybe some of you have also been on a gangster tour, where I got on a little tiny bus pre-COVID with a bunch of other people. And this guy dressed in a zoot suit drove us around town and talked about all these different places. So one of the things he told me was something that I'd heard before, and maybe looking at the Kansas City Power and Light building here, you know what I'm about to say. It turns out that it is totally a myth that the Kansas City Power and Light building was inspiration for the Shandor building in Ghostbusters. That's where all the action takes place, like the where the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man explodes at the end. And I think they're like these little demon guys and they go up to the sky, and there's this graphic here too. So that was totally a myth. And so if you hear anybody say that that's true, then you can tell them definitively, no, it is not true. I've researched and researched, and that building that was inspiration is actually in New York City. So I tossed that one off my list. But then there are other ideas that were really fun too. So somebody wrote to me and said, well, President Obama's great-great-grandparents are buried in Lenexa. So I think that's totally cool. So I really wanted to figure out how to include that. Their names were Della and Charles Payne. And I do think that that's true, as far as I could tell it is. But then I thought, wait a second, everybody's great-great-grandparents are buried somewhere. Is that really that strange? And I decided, no, it's not that strange. And then speaking of strange, Weird Al here. So somebody else told me that Weird Al's parents or grandparents, one or the other, used to live in Strawberry Hill. So that's also pretty cool. But then I had to think again, well, you know, there are lots of celebrities and their parents and grandparents lived somewhere, and this is probably someone's private residence. So do I really want to send someone by this house? And I decided no, and I tossed that one out too. So it was stuff like that where I just had to keep thinking and thinking. My own mother had an idea about a bear pit in Merriam. So in Merriam, it was like a hub for entertainment for a pretty long time, I think around the turn of the last century. They had a giant amusement park and I think a ballpark also. And it was this really cool place because, you know, it was close enough to the city that people could get to it, but then it also felt like it was out of the city. And one of the attractions was a bear pit, which I think was literally a pit with a bear in it. And then so people would pay whatever it was, like a dime or something, I don't know. And then they would look at the bear in the hole. So my mom thought I really should include that. And it's weird and it's funny, or it's not funny for the bear, but there's no site anymore. There is no hole people can go visit. So we kind of went back and forth about that and decided there wasn't a way to include it. So I took that one out too. But what did I include? So everybody knows Bob, right? Bob the Hereford Bull. And somebody told me that I should include him on the list. And at first I thought, why would I include Bob? What's interesting about Bob? I see now that up close he has red eyes. That's pretty creepy. And I didn't know that because he lives 90 feet up in the sky, right? I mean, most people have passed him on 35 before. And he's been around forever. He's was originally the symbol of the Hereford Association, and he's always been 90 feet in the air. His dedication ceremony was in 1953, and President Eisenhower was there. I can tell you, he weighs 5,500 pounds, and he's 12 feet tall. And he went into storage from 1997 to 2002, and then there was this big outcry, "Where's Bob? Bring him back." And so then he was relocated to Mulkey Square Park. That building you see in the background is the FBI building, the Kansas City FBI building. And then that's Mulkey Square Park's playground down there below him also. And none of that sounded strange to me. So I kept thinking, is there a way to include Bob? Because he is such a symbol, and everybody does know him. And I thought about it, and I almost didn't include him. But then one day when I was doing my research, brace yourselves, I ran across a shocking photo from 1954 from Time Life magazine. So it turns out that Bob is anatomically correct. And I was kind of delighted by that because, you know, he spends all his time way, way up in the sky, and you can't really tell this. Now, I couldn't use this photo, which was probably for the best because it's very tawdry. So this photo does not appear in the book. But what I did do in order to get a photo of at least part of his parts was I had my son fly his drone up as close as he could to it and take a few pictures. He's a very good drone operator and photographer. And he did that, but it was in front of the FBI building. And so we were a little bit scared that we weren't supposed to be flying a drone by the FBI building, but we were in and out really fast. So we got some pretty good shots, and it was a really fun mother-son adventure. So that's included, and this is why. Other things that are included, this one initially looks really strange. This is a pink tree in Swope Park. And a lot of people I think would remember the Open Spaces art exhibition from 2018. It was a citywide exhibition. There were art installations that artists from all over the country came and put up everywhere. I mean, I forget how many square miles these exhibitions were planted, but they were all over the place. And so this tree is by Dylan Mortimer. He's a local artist, and his idea was he wanted to make a bronchial tree. He grew up with cystic fibrosis, and so a lot of his art has been in recent years about lungs and about bronchial trees. And so he wanted to make this giant installation, but how do we do that? How could we make something that big? So he went to Swope Park, and with the park rangers, he walked all around the park, and they identified a totally dead tree. And so, everybody looked at it. I don't know, probably tree scientists, arborists, they examined the tree and they said, yeah, this tree's dead. Do what you want to do with it for open spaces. So Dylan spray painted it, I think, or somehow he painted the entire thing pink. And then he threw a bunch of glitter on it. And he named it Tree Broken Tree. And I think this was right after his second lung transplant, or maybe it was right before, but he has had 2 lung transplants and he's only in his early 40s, which is phenomenal. And as far as I know, he's doing pretty well right now. So if no one knows that backstory, then running into a pink tree at Swope Park would feel very strange, which is why it's included. However, even if you know all of that, exactly why the tree is there, what got really strange was that it came back to life. So this is a picture of it from, I think, last summer, and it grew leaves. Surprise! And so Dylan was also very, very surprised by that. And so that's why it really needed to be in the book. And I guess maybe it was the power of the glitter. I really don't know, but it came back to life anyway. So I had 90 stories that I was really pleased with at this point. And, feeling pretty good, had 90 stories. And then, and also I wanted to mention that I had one Amazon comment that I had, I don't know, the person didn't say cheated, but the person thought my title was inaccurate since it's Secret Kansas City. And I cast kind of a wide net when I looked for places. I decided that so many of the surrounding towns refer to themselves as Kansas Cityans. So I think we all know how if we leave town and somebody says, where are you from? We say we're from Kansas City, even if we are not, even if we're from 20 minutes away, 30 minutes away. So I included sites that were as much as I think I went even an hour and a half out of town. I wanted to include as many communities as possible and let them know that this is their book too. They are still part of Kansas City. So I felt really good about these 90 places that I had found. Excuse me. And then budget cuts. So this went to the press in, I think it was April or May was when when they were about to send this to the printer. And right before that, they said, wait a second, we want to make this book shorter. We just can't afford to make it full length. So instead of having 90 places, we want you to have 83. So you can imagine how I just about passed out. I just about fainted. How am I supposed to cut 7 of these stories that I have spent, I don't know what it was, at least a year collecting and then figuring out how to write about, researching a lot. So, but I did it, and I sorted through, and I tried to use my criteria that I've told you about. So Lila's Hair Museum, that got cut. I'm surprised by how many people don't know about Lila's Hair Museum. It's in Independence, and it's very, very cool and very, very strange. This woman, Lila Cahoon, I think she's in her 90s now, and she started collecting hair art. This is all hair in the picture. It's on a wreath, so that's, you can see when you realize what it is, you can see how it is hair. That she started collecting it in 1953, and her collection grew and grew and grew until she decided to open a museum in Independence. And I think she has over 3,000 pieces now. Her oldest one is from the 1680s, and a very nice docent will tell you all about it if you want to visit her. But I did take that one out of the book because it's in most guidebooks. And if you Google weird things in Kansas City, it will almost certainly come up. So I decided Lila really didn't need my help, and I took that out. So then I had to think, okay, so what else is there like that? Well, Stoll Cemetery. So I wish that I could see people so I could say, you know, show of hands, who knows about Stoll? So either people have heard about it and they're totally bored. They don't want to hear anything else about Stoll, whatever, or else they have not heard of it at all and want to know what it is I'm talking about when I refer to it. And I've never actually been there. I think I'm a little bit scared, but it's, I think it started in the 1850s. I don't know, is a cemetery started or is it founded? I don't know the right word, but I decided not to include it for that reason, that lots of people seem to know about it, and that I don't know the verb to use for how it started in 1850. But I had it on the list because in my research about it, I discovered that it is on a lot of websites. It's called one of the 7 gateways to hell. And I thought that was pretty cool. That's right here in Kansas. But I have to ask too, the 7 gateways to hell, like over what area? Are we talking about in the United States? Are we talking about the entire world, or just in Kansas? Are there 6 other gateways to hell in Kansas? I don't know, and I couldn't answer that question, so another reason to skip. But there's a website called Week in Weird, W-E-E-K, Week in Weird, that says one of the most recent popes, I don't know which one, refused to fly over it. So if he visited the United States, he told his pilot, "You may not fly me over Kansas," because of Stoll Cemetery. Also, Satan's child is buried there. So you can go visit this if you'd like, but it is not in the book, which is sad in some ways, but not in others. I also decided not to include the debate over the Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, which got pretty weird, and it's not resolved yet, which is one of the reasons I decided to go ahead and leave it out. But some of you may remember that in 2018 and 19, there was quite a to-do over finding a way to give Kansas City a Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. 955 other cities in the United States have a street named after Dr. King, and we do not, which is strange on its own, right? So the Paseo, I think it was the city, decided that the Paseo would be renamed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. And so they changed all the signs in 2019. It was 100 signs over in a 10-mile strip. But then a group called Save the Paseo, you might remember, they said, no, that's not right. We want the Paseo to stay the Paseo, and they lobbied and they won. And so all of those signs, 100 signs over 10 miles, they were all changed back to the Paseo. And you know what? I don't know where we stand with that right now. But that's not in the book either. So that's another cutting room floor story. So ultimately, I ended up including 83 stories, and I got them down. I think that there is room for improvement probably, and there's room for input also. You know, I want to know what people think about this. And so it would be great. What I really like the idea of is including, well, I made a hashtag. So on any social media site, there's hashtag Secret Kansas City. And so if you think of something that I did not include, or that you would have included in your own book about what's Secret Kansas City, then you can hashtag the place and a picture of it. And then I and other people who are interested can go and search for your hashtag and see what you have to say. And so that's a fun way that other people can be included in this project. So this picture, I will tell you, is from the United Federation of Doll Clubs. That is in the book. That was something that I was just fascinated by. This is the founder of the United Federation of Doll Clubs and her doll. And I don't remember what her doll's name is. And unfortunately, I think this place has been closed during the pandemic. So if you do decide to go visit it, you need to call them ahead. But it's a fascinating place that I had no idea it existed. But it's apparently the International Federation of Doll Clubs is something like, I think it includes something like 15 countries, and it's thousands and thousands of members, and they have conferences here, and it's out by the airport. And they also have a really fabulous museum full of dolls you had no idea existed. It's not just a bunch of Barbies and Cabbage Patch Kids. It's stuff like a 3/4 size doll of a countess who had so many lovers they started killing each other. So she was charged with being an accomplice to murder. And that doll is there. That's pretty fun if you ask me. So that's what I have for you. And I will be really happy to answer lots and lots of questions, because I know there were some things in Katie's teaser that I did not talk about in my slide presentation. So I am going to unshare my screen here. There we go. And we're back.
Hi, Anne. Well, I have one question for you, which is, are people still wanting to tell you stories about things in Kansas City they think are weird or that you missed the first time around?
Yeah, I do get notes every now and then. One woman sent me a handwritten note. So I had a real note in the mail explaining her relationship with the city, because it feels so personal to people, and I love that I am a Kansas Citian. Here's what makes me a Kansas Citian, and I grew up here, and I know about this, and my dad did this. And so I'm getting emails and actual things in the mail about that. And so people are saying, well, why didn't you include this? And they want explanations, like, because all these places feel so personal to people, and it's not, they're not challenging me exactly, but some of them just feel like, oh my gosh, how could you leave out, whatever it is? And then I have to explain myself. But on a lot of them, if there is something that I think meets my criteria, I do jot it down. So I have a running list in case I get to put out a second edition. And then I'll swap out, I think it's something like 20% of the current stories. Then I can rotate those out for a second edition at some point years down the road.
We look forward to the second edition. Everyone will want to see that. And we have a question from the audience, someone who wants to know, did anyone want an oddity, perhaps on private property, to stay secret, and so they requested not to be included in the book?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I don't know. I tried to stay away from private property. So I was very tempted to include Sour Castle, which, lots and lots of people know about in KCK. And I went by it and I took pictures of it, and it was on my original list. But then I just thought, that just doesn't seem like a good idea, because it is private property, and I think there's even barbed wire around it. And actually, I saw today that it's on the historic KC's site of most endangered architectural sites, something like that. So I don't know if that means it's about to be torn down also. But yeah, I try to be sensitive to private property. I didn't want to get into that too much. I mean, of course, there are places that are in neighborhoods, because that's part of this project, is what's in your neighborhood.
I saw that in the book, and I used to live over in the Argentine area. And so the one neighborhood item with the steps that you mentioned,
Yeah.
wow, that's fascinating. And now I got to ask you, why did you not include the wall of heads? And
I don't know. I don't know
I bet
about the
there's
wall of
somebody on the
heads.
call that knows.
Yeah.
We have another question. So what do you think the secret places say about Kansas City?
No, that's a good one. I don't know what they say about Kansas City. I think maybe they say more about the person who collected the weird places. And that's why I keep saying to people, you've got to make your own weird list and share it with other people. So like in my list, I included a lot of things that have to do with books. So I do a lot with books. I write about books. I read a lot of books, and I talk to a lot of authors. And so for me, a lot of the weird places had to do with books. So what they say about the city itself is, I don't know. I think we'd have to compare that to other secret city books, which we can do since there are plenty. And we could go through, and I've leafed through a few of them, but I haven't really read the other secret books. But I think that would be a really fun thing to do, so I encourage people, if you have another hometown, a place you grew up and then you moved to Kansas City, find out if your hometown has one and check it against mine and see, are there real differences? I didn't include, people always think about barbecue and jazz, of course. I think I have one barbecue related thing out of the 83, and I have one or two jazz related things that, maybe wouldn't be included in a city like, I don't know, maybe Denver. So there will be differences like that. But for the most part, it's all these little things, like I said, in neighborhoods, and every neighborhood has these nutty little monuments and tiny little graveyards and stuff that people don't check out because they're used to seeing them.
What was your favorite or most surprising find?
Every time somebody asks me that, I give a different answer, I think. But the one that I've been stuck on for about a week is that doll museum, which is why I brought it up. That definitely, for me, was a surprise because I was a child in the early 80s and through the 80s, and I was right here. And so, you'd think that most little girls in the 80s, when this place was established, would somehow know about this doll museum because I think they host tea parties when they're open, and they host all these speakers and stuff. And so you would think any girl who grew up here would know about it, but nobody I have talked to has ever heard of it. And the dolls in the place, they're just, wow, the murderer doll. I just love it, So to me, that's my favorite right now, but I feel a little bit bad saying that as my answer, since people can't go there this minute. That's kind of too bad, but you can look at their website at least.
How did you go about assessing whether something qualified as a secret as opposed to maybe something that you just hadn't heard of?
Well, that was a hard call also. So, I did grow up here. I was born somewhere else, but I did all my school years here, and then I moved away for 12 years and came back here 15 years ago when I was 30. And so I felt like between that and having been a freelance journalist in Kansas City for the past 7 years, I felt like the odds were pretty good that if I had not heard of something, that there would be quite a few other people who also hadn't heard of it. And that would, we're loosely calling it a secret, right? I mean, people like with Bob, everybody knows Bob. Bob is no secret. So it was a hard call. So like I said, I kind of had to react to it with what is that about? And hopefully other people will agree for the most part. And, I had to really dig, but there are things like, there are a couple things in there from the Guinness Book of World Records. And, of course, that can't be a secret at all since it's in the Guinness Book of World Records. But it's just a matter of, how many people really know about it.
Well, I kept calling your book Strange Kansas City. That one's up for grabs.
Well, someone else can write Strange Kansas City. I mean it. I want people to make their own lists and take their own pictures and tell other people about it.
I look forward to that. I'm going to be looking up the hashtags. And so is there a website where folks can find the other Secret City books?
The website is for the publisher, Reedy, Reedy, and I think I don't remember actually if it's Reedy Press or Reedy.com or what it is exactly, but you'll be able to find the Secret City books there, or else you can, just do a search for just think of what Secret Los Angeles or whatever, and that should come up in any search. And are we running out of questions, Katie? Or do we have some more?
We are running out, but okay. I do want to say that the website is reedypress.com.
Oh, okay, good.
We'll put that in the YouTube chat for folks.
Okay. And I just asked if we're running out of questions because I know I felt a little bad that I didn't talk about some of the things in your teaser.
Oh, well, I need you to talk about that bridge to nowhere because I could not stop staring at that picture of the bridge alongside I-70.
Okay.
What's that about?
Well, yeah, no, apparently it was just part of a project that wasn't completed. So it's not something, and I don't have the book in front of me. Why didn't I bring the book? Why don't I have it in front of me? So, but it was, hey, you have it. But it was, just part of an incomplete project that nobody really would notice. But there are all these bridges in some parts of the country. There are these actual bridges that are made for wildlife to go over safely, like there are bridges and tunnels over highways. And so it almost, there's grass on each side of it. So it almost seems like it should be something like that. But instead it's just it looks like an overpass, but it just goes grass. And so what I thought was interesting about that is that they're actually, I think it was some campus of the University of Missouri is studying it to try to figure out what the effects of weather are on a completely untreated stretch of highway, which is kind of neat that, it's since nobody drives on it, nobody has to throw down salt and whatever other chemicals there are to de-ice the bridge. So that's fun. And they'll be able to see, how many years does it take for the pavement to wear out and for it to crack if nobody's driving on it and if there's no salt or chemicals on it to melt the ice. So that's something that's pretty exciting.
That's great. This construction is doing something for somebody.
It's doing something. And so I think that part of the idea was to try to figure out, is there a better way to treat, to care for the pavement of a highway, because that's such an expensive thing. And in the book, I have information about how much that costs every year for the state of Missouri, just in case anybody wonders.
Can you walk on it? Can anybody walk right up to it and see it?
As far as I know, but I haven't tried it. But yeah, now that you say that, yeah, I mean, that would be kind of fun because there is just grass all around it. So you'd think.
We have another question from the audience. Someone who wants to know, did you consider including some of Kansas City's famous murders, such as Colonel Swope or Kansas City Mafia in your book? And if you did, why'd you toss them?
Yes, the Swope murders are in there. So it turns out that, everybody knows Swope Park. And so Mr. Swope, Thomas, I think, oh, my book has arrived. Thank you. Swope, he lived with his family. He never had his own children, and he was a cajillionaire. And he lived with, I think his extended family, like a niece or something. And he had this doctor who was married to. So I'm doing this from memory, and there are 83 places, so the details get really fuzzy when I try to do this from memory. But this doctor, Dr. Hyde, I think was his name, he was married to the executor of the will's niece or something. So the niece stood to gain a lot from Swope's death. And so then, of course, by extension, the doctor would gain a lot also. So he started administering things like arsenic to members of the family, and I think he had something like malaria pills. I mean, this guy, and then so when Swope died, he was like, "Ooh, it's a mystery. Brain hemorrhage. He's dead now. Oops." And then, but he killed the people who were lined up to get the money, like the people between his wife and Swope. So he was trying to just knock out as many people as possible so that he would get a maximum payoff from his wife, maximum inheritance. So there was all this murder mystery stuff around the Swopes 100 or so years ago, but it was turned out to be no mystery at all. It's just like no mystery illnesses. It's just the doctor knocking everybody off. So yeah, that is included. I think that's my only murder mystery included.
I think if I were the wife, I would start to get very nervous.
She divorced him. And
Good.
That's something that was kind of cool because, you know, that was, in a way, that was the most unexpected part because it was so long ago. And I forget what year it was, but it was, you know, at a time when women weren't saying, whoa, hey, take a hike, dude. And, you know, they weren't divorcing. They were just staying with the person because they had to. But she did. So that was kind of cool.
She was pretty smart then to get away from him right then. Although that would have been a really interesting ending to the story if she could have turned him over for it.
Yes.
And you didn't consider including any mafia stories in your book?
I wanted to find some mafia stories, and that's why I took that gangster tour. So I thought, I'll go on the gangster tour and I'll find all sorts of really cool mobster stories. And there were some things, but I had the hardest time figuring it out. So, you know, this was a very, very research intensive project. So like, I kept hearing things about tunnels under the city. So like between hotels downtown, like maybe it was around Power and Light, there were tunnels beneath the ground so that these mobsters could go from one hotel to the next, or maybe escape their favorite restaurant and get into a hotel and then jump on a trolley or something. I don't know. It was like escape plan stuff. But I kept running into walls with the research. So many people said, well, what about the tunnels? Well, what about the mafia? And I couldn't get there. So they aren't included. But like I said, if somebody has a good story and really good sources for this stuff, then tell me. That's a thing, hashtag Secret Kansas City and give me your sources. And, and I'm collecting all of those for future use, I hope.
So, Anne, like we may have run out of audience questions. So okay. I want to close with this one. Can you give us a teaser of what you might be including in the last the next book?
Oh gosh, the next book. I don't know. I don't know that there will be a next Secret Kansas City book unless there is a second edition. And like I said, the publisher has mentioned losing 20% of the stories and putting 20, adding in more. And there are just all sorts of things that I've run into that I would like to explore. One of them, may not, but again, a book thing, because it's mine. One of them was that somebody bought a book from me through my website, and I could see that it was, they were on Anne Shirley Drive. And some people will say, oh, Anne Shirley, she's the character in Anne of Green Gables. So I thought that's kind of weird. And so that was something that I wanted to investigate. Why is there an Anne Shirley Drive? Was it that the person who platted the area, maybe his daughter was really into Anne of Green Gables, or is there some historic person who's related to Kansas City and her name just happens to be Anne Shirley? I don't know, but it's just little things like that I try to keep a running list of so that I can look into later.
That might make a really great blog to support this book as well.
Yes, maybe so.
I can also tell you, if you're looking for some more strange stories, Kansas City Public Library has our KCQ page where we have weird questions about Kansas City that come to us from the community members. So check out that. That's kclibrary.org/KCQ. And then please tell the audience where they can purchase copies of your book. Will you be signing them if they purchase from you directly? And when do they need to order a copy to get it in time for Christmas?
I think it's anybody's guess about the post office, but what I'm doing is I am signing all the books ordered through my website, and I can personalize that if somebody writes a little note in the, I think there's a spot for order notes, something like that. So if you want to say to, Uncle Lou or whoever, then, then let me know and I'll do that. I'm happy to do that. And I'm hearing from people that they're getting their books very quickly. I'm going to the post office every day. So as soon as you put an order in that day or the very next morning, I'll get it out. And I can't make any promises on behalf of the post office. All I can do is get them in the mail as fast as I can and hope for the best. But the spelling of my name, it's AnneKniggendorf.com is my website, and there's a secret Kansas City tab, and that's where people can order books. And so I really hope people do. I've had so much fun with those notes from people. Like there was one, somebody ordered one, and in the order notes, he wrote, Andrea, don't open. And so then I guess my instruction was that I was supposed to, on the envelope, make a thing in all bold, Andrea, don't open this. So it was a Christmas present. So that's been really fun. And it's just fun to see which parts of town and the surrounding areas people are ordering from. So I've really enjoyed that. It's helped me feel really connected during this time.
Well, thank you so much, Anne. And folks who are watching, please look for the link to Anne's website in the chat there on the library's YouTube channel. And let me say again, Anne, thank you so much for doing this. This was a delight and certainly eye-opening. And I'm sure all of us found a secret place in Kansas City that we had never even heard of before. Even some
I hope so.
who have been living here forever.
I hope so. Well, thank you so much for having me, Katie, and for hosting this.
Okay. Good night, everyone, and happy holidays. KC Library will be back with more in 2021.
Happy New Year.